Dear brothers, I can remember it was 2001 and I was sitting on the floor in our living room watching my sister throw in a VHS tape. And I'm sure we probably had to fight someone for this at Blockbuster. But the opening has this eerie choir singing, and this lady starts speaking a foreign language and then translate herself, and it definitely had my attention as a 9-year-old boy at the time. And I was probably a touch scared, as I remember, but I won't admit too much. But then kind of the most infamous cinematic intro plays. And I watch this opening scene where the great rings are made. 3 to the elves, 7 to the dwarves, 9 to men, and finally the one ring that rules them all. And that begins, as hopefully all of you know, the Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is undoubtedly in my, if not my favorite series, in the top couple of all time. And there are so many quotes and passages from that series, from Tolkien as a whole, that have stayed with me. He was a master at explaining difficulties in life and struggling and how to find hope and what friendship can do for you. His messages were so brilliant, and he always made you feel like he was a part of those stories. But the one that has always struck me the most is a conversation that Frodo and Gandalf have in the Fellowship of the Ring. They are in the mines of Moria, and Frodo is regretting having the ring and having to carry the responsibility that it bears. And he says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had ever happened." And without hesitation, Gandalf looks at him and says, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." I actually prefer the line that's used in the book, where Frodo says this, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." To me, Frodo carrying the ring is a supreme example of a human bearing their cross, putting their struggle on their back and going forward. Just like God bore the burden of sin by carrying the cross, Frodo is carrying a ring which constitutes a lot of different parallels, but certainly unbearable suffering, sin, and immense power. But it still has to be carried. I have always kind of equated that power to our mortal minds conceiving that they can be godlike. Frodo gets a taste every time that ring slips onto his finger, and one unchecked, he can become like the famed creature Gollum, or even his older cousin and mentor Bilbo from The Hobbit, who originally finds the ring. But the power of that ring corrupts their souls, Gollum certainly far more than Bilbo. But it's known that corruption has to be destroyed. The ring has to get thrown into the fires of Mount Doom, which is Frodo's ultimate journey goal. We all have a ring to bear in life, a suffering that we did not ask for, yet here it is. Much like Frodo did, we ask ourselves, what can we do about such suffering so that those in the future may not know such evils? As men, we're given circumstances that are out of our control, and we have to make a decision about what we're going to do about it. It's not abnormal for us to wish we didn't have such struggles. I would imagine that the men of World War II didn't ask to go to the beaches of Normandy. I can imagine that the Spartans didn't really want the Persians to come and try and take over. Jesus didn't ask to be crucified for our sin. They had to make a decision, and a decision that was far more difficult, a decision that would undoubtedly probably end in their demise, their death, or at least immense struggle, and the potential for failure. But they bore their cross. They carried the ring on their neck, just like Frodo did. They suffered. They chose the noble road. The road which allowed others to not have such difficulty. The future and our future generations are going to have their own problems to manage, their own crosses to bear. But they don't need to have to bear this one as well. This evil, this difficulty, this dragon that needs to be slain. It reminds me of an important point though, guys. Darkness is littered throughout history. Think of the writings of Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps, or Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag system of Soviet Russia, or even the writings of Churchill as he attempted to figure out what the hell to do with Nazi Germany. They didn't ask for those times. It wasn't like they just looked up and wished, oh, I wish that I was in a concentration camp and people were being murdered and I have to figure out how to stop a tyrant. I have to imagine that must have been hell on earth to them. But they persevered. They took the struggles that were given to them on their backs and they climbed. And on the other side of it, when they made it through that evil and darkness, there was an immense amount of beauty that is beyond compare. Stories of survival and love and faith and perseverance that have changed millions upon millions of lives. That includes mine. Might I recommend the incredible books Man's Search for Meaning by Frankl and The Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn. If you need any kind of proof of my claims, Man's Search for Meaning has been a monthly read of mine for over a decade now. But the point I took from all of that is those who face the darkness of their lives with grace and a fighting spirit are going to be the real heroes. They're the ones who change the course of time. In their moments of difficulty and strife, they chose to keep moving forward. And that's the example that Frodo gives us. Even when all seems lost and hope is fading away, they take one more step. They never turn back. On multiple occasions, as you read through the books or even as you watch the movies, Frodo just wants to stop. It doesn't seem like there's anything left for him to do. He would rather just give up. That it's too much to bear. I can't do this. But he keeps going. And I'm going to leave you guys with this today. And it's one of my favorite conversations that Frodo's closest friend Sam has with him. And Sam says this: "It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I now know. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something." Frodo says, "What are we holding on to, Sam?" And Sam replies, "That there's some good in the world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." Happy Monday, boys. God bless all of you. I love you. Be strong. Let's get after it. Go bear your cross today, guys.